Over the years, I've designed and built probably 6 or 7 different stools for my shop. About a year ago, I made a prototype for a new one using 2x2 boards, cheap, inexpensive lumber, and I made the whole thing just using handheld power tools. I wanted to see overall how this would fit together and how it would look. So I've been meaning to revisit that project and refine the plans a little bit to come up with something a little bit more elegant. My idea is for this to be a really sturdy stool that can be banged around inside of a workshop, or I think it would work great as an outdoor bar stool that you would use on a deck as part of maybe a bar set or a patio table set. Like the prototype, I want to use strong but inexpensive materials to build this with. So I bought a few 2x3 studs. These things are real inexpensive. I think they cost a little over $3 a piece for an 8-foot board. I picked these up at the local home center, and there's a lot of bad ones in the rack there. You've got to kind of sort through them and spend some time. You'll be able to pick out some fairly straight ones with not a lot of defects on them. Okay, so you know what I just did? I checked out the receipt for that lumber, and it turns out that 2x3 was $2.75, which I think is a pretty good deal. And you're probably wondering why I didn't get a 2x4, and it's because the big box Orange Home Center didn't have any kiln-dried 2x4s. All they had was the green, really wet and heavy 2x4s that are all crooked and horrible. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. Even when they have the kiln-dried 2x4s, they all pretty much suck, and it's hard to find a couple of good ones. But luckily, I was able to find these 2x3s, and they work out good. And for $2.75, you can't go wrong. 2x3 boards are 1.5 inches thick, but I'm going to have to make these a little bit smaller because I also want to square up the faces of these boards because they're a little bit wavy. So ultimately the legs and cross pieces for the stool will be about 1.25 inches by 1.25 inches. One way to cut a pair of boards so that they're exactly the same length is to just cut them at the same time, and that's what I'm doing here on my table saw. The 2 rear legs are going to be longer because they also form the back support. After I've cut the legs down to size, I can also cut out all of the support pieces. These will be the braces that support the top and the seat, as well as the 4 braces that make up the footrest. To cut these all to the same length, I'll just use that stop block on my miter gauge. One thing about making chairs of any kind is that the back needs to be angled back slightly. If you ever sit in a chair that has a perfectly vertical back to it, it's pretty uncomfortable. So what I'm going to do is just taper those 2 rear legs up at the top. It's not much of an angle. It's probably about 5 degrees, but it's enough to make it much more comfortable. I'll use my homemade tapering jig to cut these out. This will be pretty simple because I only need to cut one face on each of these boards. If you'd like to make one of these tapering jigs yourself, it's super easy. I've got plans over at myshopjigs.com and also a video showing you how to use it. Everything in my shop is on wheels, so it's really easy to pull things out and to store them up against the walls. This is my router table. I'll just pull it out and I can attach my vacuum hose to the fence. I'm going to cut a series of chamfers. These are just 45-degree bevels along the edges of some of these boards. And of course I'll install a chamfering bit in the router to do that. The first chamfers are going to be on the ends of the 4 legs. This is the side that'll be on the floor, and these chamfers actually serve a purpose. It prevents the end grain from splitting when you slide the stool around on the floor. I'm going to echo that chamfer on the tops of the two back support pieces. These ones are just decorative. And what I want to do is make a chamfer on two of the edges of all of the footrest pieces. And this will prevent the sharp edges of those boards from splintering off when you rest your shoes on them. I'm going to join the frame together using pocket screws. I think pocket hole joinery is a great way to make strong, effective joints. It's real simple to use. Assuming you're not a woodworking purist with moral objections to using pocket hole joinery, the only drawback to using it really is the pocket holes themselves are pretty unsightly. So really the whole key to pocket hole joinery is using them where they won't be visible. In this case, I'm going to put them on the underside of the footrest so you won't see those. And I'm going to put them on the top side of the upper rails. That way the seat slats will cover up those holes. And when you reach underneath the seat to move the stool around, you won't be feeling those holes. I'm lining up all four legs and then drawing lines where I want to align all of those cross pieces. I especially want the top pieces to all line up so that the seat fits down evenly. And as always, when you're using pocket screws, it's really important to clamp the pieces together first before driving the screws. Otherwise, they can slide out of alignment. You can use glue in addition to the pocket screws if you want, but in this case, I'm going to use just the pocket screws because the glue really won't add that much strength in this situation where it's end grain meeting up with that face grain of those legs. The screws alone will be plenty strong. To drive the screws into the footrest, I have to use my 90-degree attachment on my drill. This is one of the handiest accessories you can own. I use it for all kinds of things, not just pocket screws. I think it's like an essential tool in my shop, basically. It lets you use your drill in tight spaces where it normally wouldn't fit. In this case, my drill won't fit between those 2 feet. Using the right angle attachment is always a little bit awkward the first few minutes I use it. But usually it doesn't take too long before I kind of figure out a system. That is not where I wanted it. So what I drew that line because I wanted this up 6 inches. I wanted the bottom of this up 6 inches. This is probably a little too close to the floor to comfortably set your feet on. So I need to raise this up a little bit. But first I'll just go ahead and do this one at the right place. There, that's better. All right, so these should match up. Let's see. This will be the back. Put it the right side, and then yeah. The seat, it's more important that the seat really matches up than the footrest. I don't think that's going to make too big of a difference. In fact, you could, you know, stagger them so that these side ones are raised up a little bit rather than all in line. But I'm going to make mine all in line. And now I can join that front assembly to the rear assembly using those cross braces. All right, real simple frame construction. Look how this curves that way, the angle's back that way. This is supposed to be the back. This needs to go. Okay, not that big of a deal. Just take this off and put it on that side, I guess. Oh man, what am I thinking? Believe it or not, once in a while people will ask me if I plan my mistakes for the videos. Just so I'll have to, so I can show the mistakes. I'm just not that good. Okay, so there's the inside. This is the back here. That means this has to go this way. How about that? I figured it out. Ugh. Okay, I think we got it this time. There we go. There is one stool framed out. Easy peasy. Just a couple little minor setbacks. Now all I got to do is cut the slats for the seat and the back, and it's done. I'm going to make all of the seat slats and the back slats the same width and just kind of space them equally apart. The lengths of the back pieces will be a little bit smaller because they're going to fit inside of the uprights. I pulled my router back out to put chamfers along the top edges of the seat pieces and along the front sides of the back pieces. This will give them a nicer look, and it also helps when I'm spacing the slats apart that if they're not exactly the same distance apart, you won't really notice because of those chamfers. Plus, it's probably a good idea not to have sharp edges on those slats where your butt's gonna be. I always find that it's the smallest details on a project that can have the biggest impact. These tiny bevels really make this stool look much more professional, and I think when somebody looks at it, they'll just kind of register it unconsciously without realizing that's the difference. I'm going to start with this rear slat and cut out some notches for those upright pieces. I'll use my jigsaw to cut those notches out, kind of erring on the side of caution. I don't want them to be too big. I'd rather kind of be able to refine that to get a tight fit. So I'm cutting these just slightly inside the line. I'll just keep testing the fit, then sanding it down a little bit more and testing again until it's a good fit. Once I get a good fit, I'll add a chamfer on that inside edge. And once again, that chamfer helps to disguise a fit that may not be exactly perfect. I'm kind of testing these to see what kind of a gap there is. It looks like it's about 1/8 of an inch gap, which is fine. I just don't want them right up next to each other, especially if this is going to be an outdoor stool. You want water to be able to flow through there. And I'll just glue these all on. I'm going to also add some dowel pins, but really those are going to be mostly decorative on the seat. I'll just try to space these apart as equally as possible without actually measuring anything. The spaces between them may not be exactly the same on each one, but it doesn't matter. Nobody's going to be bringing a tape measure to your house and measuring that distance between those slats. Sometimes when you're trying to apply a clamp to something like this, it's real easy for those pieces to slide out of position. So what I like to do is just set them in place with the glue and just let that glue dry for 10 minutes or so, and then add the clamps. I'm using that block of wood as a spacer to cut all of these dowel pins to the same length. The reason for using that is just so that those cut-off dowels can safely fall to the side there without falling into the blade and then throwing them back at me. I'm drawing a line down each side of the seat so that I can drive those pins in a straight line. I'll use my awl to punch kind of a starter divot for the drill bit. I've put a piece of that blue painter's tape around the bit so that I can stop it without going too deep. I'm actually not sure why I set it at that depth. These holes should have been a little bit deeper to go through the top slats and then the rails, but it doesn't really matter. That glue is going to hold these. These are just decorative. This is a Japanese flush trim saw, which comes in really handy for just this purpose. The back support slats is going to be a little trickier. These are definitely going to require those dowel pins for support, but I need to get those into position so that I could drill the holes, and my clamp would probably be in the way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue that end grain of these boards up to those uprights, but If I just put glue on that end grain and try to attach it, it probably won't hold very well, and it'll just fall off when I try to drill the holes. So if you do have to glue end grain, like in this situation, the best way I found to get it to work pretty well is to apply a lot of glue and to just pack it into the pores of the wood. I'm using my finger here I put some glue on and I just keep working it in, pressing it down. You'll feel it soaking up into that end grain, and just kind of do that until it's saturated. And then what I can do is kind of hold it into place. This is really awkward. And then attach the clamp. Once I've got it stationary with that clamp, I can adjust it a little bit just by tapping it with my mallet. I just want the front of each of these slats to be flush with the front of those uprights. That way they're going to angle backward. I let that dry for a couple of hours, and then I installed a little bit thinner drill bit, and I'm going to definitely make sure that I drill these deep enough to go through those side pieces and into the slats. Well, I didn't exactly do a great job at getting those aligned. They're kind of all over the place, but it's okay. They still provide the strength that it needs, and it gives it that rustic charm. It tells people, yes, this is a handmade piece of furniture. No robot made this thing. All right, before I sand those pins nice and smooth, I've got some messy areas around the surface there that I want to make some wood filler to fill in. So this is just some of the sanding dust. I'll just mix that with some wood glue. And just mix this until you get kind of a paste like that. Then I can fill in these spots. Finally, I can give everything a really good sanding. I'm going to start with a 60 grit sandpaper just to make sure any rough spots are taken care of. And then I'll work my way up to 120 grit. I'm using some hand sandpaper just to ease over all of the sharp edges. It's especially important on the underside surfaces where you're going to grab the chair to move it around. For the past 5 months, I've been developing my own finish, and this is the first time I'm going to get to try it out on a large project. I still have a lot more testing to do on this product, but I'm pretty excited about it, and I'll let you know more about it in the future. It's real easy to apply. It's completely non-toxic. You can even apply it with your hands. I want to test this stuff on some walnut and oak and see what kind of a change it makes to the color of the wood, if it darkens it up a little bit. On pine, it's pretty much a straight, clear coat. It really doesn't add any amber color to the wood or change it very much at all. Anyways, I'll keep you guys informed on this. Make sure you're signed up for my newsletter too over at notesfromsteve.com. If you're not already, I send that out the first Friday of every month, and I always have updates in there on anything new. And so you'll be the first to know when this thing is ready for prime time, but it's not going to be anytime soon. Hey, thanks for taking the time to watch this video. I really appreciate it.